While the world's eyes are locked on the blood and fire in Ukraine and the Middle East, now especially in Iran, another war is unfolding. This war is quieter, colder, and much closer to home. It's a war on your mind and on the information you're allowed to access, to share, or even think. And you won't see air raids or sirens or rubble. But you will see laws passed quietly without any debate by unelected officials that target not terrorists or foreign agents, but ordinary people with inconvenient opinions or even just questions. Two major shifts signal where this is heading. One is NATO's cognitive warfare program, which I've covered before, the link's in the description. The other, the focus of today's episode, is the EU's Council decision CFSP 2025-966. Before we jump into this, let me just ask you something. When was the last time you posted something online, an opinion, a quote, maybe a meme, and thought, well, this could get me in trouble? Not because it was hate speech or violent or illegal, just because it went against the grain, against the narrative. Especially if you work in a large international corporation, I think many people are cautious now what they're posting online. Now imagine waking up one morning and finding your bank account is frozen. Your name's on a sanction list and you can't travel. You can't access PayPal. You can't access your bank account, your crypto wallet, or even Patreon donations. And no, you weren't charged with anything. You were not charged with a crime or something like that. There was no court, no warning, just a click, and you're completely digitally erased. Sounds dystopian, right? Like something out of a surveillance state thriller. Except it's absolutely no fiction. It's Council Decision CFSP 2025-966. I repeat it so that it sticks in your mind. It was passed in the EU on May 20 this year, 2025. And it's real, it's here, and it's already happening. So hear me out. And I'm saying this not just as someone with a political podcast. I'm a behavior analyst, which means I don't just look at what's happening, I look at how it shapes human behavior, what it reinforces, what it punishes, what kind of culture it creates over time. And let me tell you, this decision, this shift is seismic. It changes the game not just for Europe, but for all of us. Because when speech becomes a sanctionable act, when words can freeze your assets, what's being punished isn't terrorism, it's deviation. Before we continue, if this hits a nerve, and I suspect or I hope it does, there's a full-length deep dive waiting for you over on my Substack. It breaks down CFSP 966 in forensic detail. Names, cases, legal texts, even what real people did before they were blacklisted. If you want to understand how this machinery actually works and how close it is to targeting people like you, that's where you go next. The link's in the description. And if you're serious about staying ahead of this creeping authoritarian wave, hit subscribe on Substack so you'll never miss the stuff that will not show up in your feed. Same goes for YouTube. Subscribe there too, because let's be real, they've already buried half of this content from your search. Heck, even if you subscribe, they find ways to prevent you from seeing certain content, as these screenshots from fewer comments of my channel clearly show. Okay, but for now let's start with some basics. Behavior is shaped by consequences. You punish a behavior, you get less of it. You reward a behavior, you get more. Simple as that. Now think about dissent, criticism, whistleblowing, debate. These are vital behaviors in any healthy society. They are how we test assumptions, challenge power, avoid blind consensus. But if you start punishing those behaviors, not with jail necessarily, but with things like travel ban, digital blacklisting, asset freezes, what happens? See, you don't need a dictatorship to silence people. You just need to make the costs of speaking out too high. And that's exactly what CFSP 966 does. It expands the EU's ability to impose sanctions on individuals, not just states or corporations, for speech alone, for expressing support for the wrong side in a war, for questioning the legitimacy of NATO operations, for posting on Telegram or YouTube about Iran's position, for live streaming a protest. Best of all, as I said, no court, no judge, no formal procedure required, and no contest possible. And no, these are not hypotheticals. They've already sanctioned German bloggers, Turkish journalists, media outlets, real people, real penalties, no violence, just expression. And this affects everyone. Yes, even you. You might think, okay, but I'm not in the EU. I'm in the States or Canada or wherever. Why should I care? Simple, because this logic travels fast. I show you how. Europe just normalized a playbook where speech is threat. And in the US, it's already halfway there. We have seen domain seizures, visa bans, platform bans, and we can see clearly that Washington and Ottawa are following Brussels' leads. In Canada, it has already happened. Just ask the farmers who protested there last year. Their bank accounts were all frozen whilst they were on the streets protesting. And the transatlantic intelligence community shares data. We know that. Sanction lists get synced. Platform policies ripple across borders. And soon, very soon, the same algorithms that shape your feed will be tuned to suppress anything flagged as destabilizing. Think of it as behavioral convergence. One government starts rewarding a certain pattern of control, and others, especially allies, adopt the same strategy. Different tools, same principle. And soon we are all living in an echo chamber we didn't even choose. That's the cognitive battlefield. And this is also where it's really getting dark. This new paradigm, the one behind CFSP 966, it doesn't just see dissent as annoying, they see it as a national security threat. In EU documents, speech is now categorized under hybrid warfare. I mean, you really cannot make this thing up. That's the real term they've chosen. Same as cyber attacks, same as sabotage. And here's the thing I really would like you to think about. NATO's cognitive warfare strategy, originally designed to counter foreign influence, is now turned inward. What started as a way to protect minds, that's how they call it, protect minds from enemy propaganda, is being repurposed to shape, survey, and suppress the thoughts of NATO's own citizens. Not soldiers, not spies, just regular people who post, question, or dissent. When the battlefield becomes the human mind, everyone with an opinion becomes a target. And that should terrify anyone who still thinks they're protected by democracy. Think about it, and I cannot stress this enough. Just posting a critical video can be treated like a hostile military act. So again, I have written a detailed article about how NATO's cognitive warfare program targets you over on Substack, links in the description. I can't overemphasize how important it is that you familiarize yourself with it, not because I wrote it, but because literally you are the target. This is something you really have to understand. From a behaviorist standpoint, that's a total reframing of social reinforcement. You're no longer just a citizen with an opinion. You're an actor in an information war. And this means if you post something that challenges NATO or the Western narrative, even if it's not explicitly pro-Russian or pro-Iran, you can still be labeled as a proxy. It doesn't matter if your motivations are peace, truth, or even skepticism. If your behavior reinforces a hostile narrative, whatever that is, you are part of the problem and thus punishable. But what's the behavioral fallout? So let's map this out. Let's say you sanction someone for a post. Others watch, of course. They learn, they adjust, they stop posting. Others self-censor. Some shut down entire blogs or YouTube channels. That's not only chilling, it's extinction in behavioral terms. The behavior disappears not because it's resolved, but because the cost has been risen so high that it's no longer safe to admit it. Now, if you multiply this across a society, what do you get? You get a compliance culture. Journalists don't investigate certain angles. Academics avoid controversial studies. Ordinary people, yes, people like you, think twice before sharing a clip or a link that might be seen, just might be seen, as subversive. That's not democratic hygiene, that's social conditioning. And the damage is subtle but deep, because it doesn't look like tyranny. It looks like responsible platform policy or counter-hybrid threat enforcement. But underneath, it's fear, learned helplessness, gradual normalization of punishment without due process. Let's look at the case of Iran as an example. As of June 13, 2025, that's now a little bit more than a week, the war in Iran is no longer a hypothetical. Israel struck that country and the bombing is still ongoing as I'm recording this. The US and NATO are edging closer and closer to a direct confrontation. It's only a question of time. And already we are seeing the same narrative lockdown we saw in Ukraine. Criticizing Israeli policy, you are anti-Semitic by definition. Question US involvement, you are aiding an authoritarian regime. Support peace talks from the wrong side, you're destabilizing Western unity. Same playbook, different theater. CFSP 966 isn't about Russia or Iran. It's about building an exportable mechanism for managing dissent across theaters of conflict. And Iran, mark my words, will be the next big test. Because once again, people will question, people will analyze, people will publish, and some of them, they'll be punished. And slowly, steady, the perimeter of permissible speech will shrink. That's the illusion of safety. Now, here's the behavioral trap. People think, well, if I just keep my head down, I'll be fine. That's operant conditioning at work. It's a negative reinforcement loop. You avoid the behavior, avoid the punishment. Feels safe, right? But over time, that's how passivity becomes a baseline. That's how democracies decay, not with a bang, but with a gradual withdrawal. When enough people stop acting, stop speaking, stop challenging, the behavior extinguishes not just individually, but collectively. And that vacuum, that's exactly where authoritarianism creeps in. Because nature and politics adores a vacuum. Silence becomes policy, consent is assumed, and before you know it, your passivity is being used as a proof the public agrees. This is all about us. So let me bring it back to you. If you have ever clicked like on a post about Gaza, for example, if you have ever shared an article questioning NATO, if you have ever commented on a video about diplomacy with Iran, you're part of this ecosystem. And under this new model, that might be enough to get you flagged, tracked, categorized, and yes, sanctioned. And you're getting flagged, tracked, categorized, and sanctions not by some shadowy cabal, but by large tech companies who do the dirty work for democratic governments. I had already made several videos explaining how exactly this works. The links are in the description. Because they don't need to imprison you. They just need to make it hard for you to live. Block your payments, as I said, freeze your accounts, ban your travel, smear your name. And worst of all, make your peers afraid to stand by you. That's isolation. And that's also the real behavioral innovation. Not just suppressing the target, but training the bystanders to look away. So what do we do? That's the million-dollar question. As a behavior analyst, I always come back to counter-conditioning or deprogramming. You can't just suppress bad patterns. You have to build new reinforcements. We need to create environments where truth-telling is safe, where dissent is socially supported, not just tolerated or frowned upon. That means building networks, financial, digital, emotional, that can withstand these shocks. Decentralized payment systems and social media platforms, mirror sites, civil society groups that offer legal and psychological support to the sanctioned. It means teaching people to recognize coercion in its modern forms, not just guns and jails, but blacklists, smear campaigns, algorithmic invisibility. And most of all, it means refusing to internalize the fear. Because the moment you think, maybe I shouldn't say this, is the moment the system starts winning. And yes, it's scary, I get it. Yes, there is a risk. But history is full of people who kept speaking anyway. Today we see people who were deplatformed but gained credibility. People who were sanctioned but fought back. People who were silenced but kept speaking out. Quite a number of those you find on this very channel. Let's be those people.